Alright, so we're continuing our discussion with Pride and Prejudice today. I'm going to be talking about chapters 35 through 42, just recapping what happened in the last chapter with Darcy's proposal, which Elizabeth refuses, and she refuses it on the grounds of, first, his separation of Bingley and Jane, and then also on the grounds of what the behavior towards Mr. Wickham, which all this time, like her entire opinion of Darcy, besides that initial meeting, has been built upon his mistreatment, supposed mistreatment of Mr. Wickham. And so she's out on a walk the next morning, and Elizabeth runs into Darcy, and he has a letter for her. So he gives her this letter and he walks away, and so she starts reading this letter, and in it seems that Darcy wants to kind of address the two charges that Elizabeth has kind of laid against him. And so he goes back into detail about his separation of Bingley and Jane, but he does it in a way that makes us feel like he was just doing something in service of his friend. He was trying to be a good pal. He didn't believe that Jane's affection and attention and level of attachment to Bingley was as strong as it should be, and he was worried that his friend felt too much for her and it was going to end up in heartbreak for him. He also was very honest about his worry about the connection that Bingley would have if he were to marry into the Bennet family. It would cause a lot of social kind of encumbrances for him because, yes, they are of a lower fortune, and they do not have the social connections to make the match advantageous for both parties, while it's definitely advantageous for Jane because she would be marrying up in status and in wealth. It would be, the reverse So it would definitely be advantageous for Jane, as I was saying before, but it would not be for Bingley, who would be marrying down into this family. And while that's not necessarily a negative thing in the grander scheme of things, the fact that he was wealthy, that all that could be overlooked if there wasn't the addition of the impropriety that is shown by the Bennet family on many occasions. The father, the mother, the three younger sisters. Jane and Elizabeth have kind of been above reproach when it comes to acting properly in mixed company. But the mothers made it very clear that the marriage would be advantageous for Jane, and that her marrying Bingley might help the younger sisters make good wealthy matches too. And she did all that within the hearing of Darcy. And then the father's kind of indifference and his lack of concern or lack of propriety that he's shown, and then the three younger sisters that are, well, the emo version of the Bennet girl is kind of, she just embarrasses herself, but the other two are always kind of chasing after men and trying to throw themselves. They're shameless flirts, and so he, just really kind of wanted to articulate that he didn't feel that Jane liked Bingley enough to make it worth Bingley risking so much to connect himself with that family. The real powerhouse of this letter, though, is the dealings with Wickham. And so Darcy admits that he did try to attempt to care for Wickham, which Elizabeth, or Wickham told Elizabeth it did not happen. He did give Wickham the terms of the father's his father's will. Like, his father left Wickham a sum of money. Darcy gives this money to Wickham, and then he tries to give him the position, the parsonage position, like that's on his estate, and Wickham refuses doesn't want to take orders, doesn't want to go into the church. He just wants the value of the living, or the value of the will, which Darcy gives to him. So then it's kind of implied that he gambles all of that money away and asks for more money, which he's kind of denied. He comes back around and tries to convince Darcy's younger sister, Georgiana, to elope with him, because she's supposed to inherit quite a large sum of money. I think it was like £30,000, which I think we decided was like over $1 million in U.S. terms. And Darcy puts the kibosh on that and like ends that, and that can't happen. So it turns out then that Wickham is not the stand-up gentleman he portrays himself to be. And so that is shocking to Elizabeth, because she believed and trusted in Wickham and what he said so wholeheartedly, and she allowed it to color her opinion of Darcy. And so now here she is, she's discovered the truth, and she's having some misgivings about all of that, about her opinion of him, and obviously her feelings about him and for him. So Darcy and Fitzwilliam, they leave Rosings. A week later, Elizabeth leaves Rosings as well. Lady Catherine wanted her to stay a little while longer, but she was ready to go home with everything that had happened. She's confused, and she's kind of upset and kind of hurt about everything that's kind of transpired, and wants to just go home so she can try to figure things out. She stops off in London to pick up Jane at the gardener's, and then she comes home. Catherine and Lydia are with their father when they come to pick her up, and they're all in a twitter because the regiment is leaving Meryton, and they're traveling to Brighton, which is a beachside town near the coast. They're going to be there for the summer, and the younger girls are hoping that they can convince their parents to allow them to spend the summer there, so that they will be close to the troops and they can continue their pursuit of husbands that they've been on this entire journey. Their development arc is very flatline, if you haven't noticed at this point. Lydia also mentions that Mr. Wickham who is still in Meryton at this time, is no longer interested in Miss King, the one that he switched his attentions off of Elizabeth for, the one that had the small fortune, and that he is no longer interested in her, and that she has left Meryton to go to Liverpool to live with her uncle. Elizabeth tells Jane in confidence the truth about Wickham from Darcy's letter. They debate about exposing him publicly, and they ultimately decide against it, so they tell no one of what Darcy has told them. Lydia is invited to go to Brighton with the Forsters. So Colonel Forster and his wife are traveling, obviously, with the troops, and Mrs. Forster asks Lydia to accompany her as a companion, and Mr. Bennet agrees to allow this to happen, thinking that, no real danger can befall her. She'll be with a military family, and he'll protect her. Colonel Forster will keep her out of any real danger. Elizabeth sees Wickham one last time before the regiment leaves. She does not mention to him that she knows about the truth that she's discovered about him. Lydia leaves for Brighton with the Forsters, and then in July, about a month later from that instance, Elizabeth leaves Meryton to go with the Gardners on a tour of Derbyshire, which is where Mr. Darcy lives. They convince her to take a tour of Darcy's home, which is Pemberley, and the only way she'll agree to it is if she knows that Mr. Darcy is not supposed to be at home, which she is assured that he is not, so she willingly agrees to go. Final thoughts on this section. Darcy's letter is really the beginning of a humbling process for both Elizabeth and for Darcy, which kind of results in the development, or I guess maybe more the maturation of their attitudes towards each other. This whole time, Darcy has, who has behaved with such pride and arrogance, you know, her saying no to him and rejecting him and turning him down, it was a blow to his pride. And so he did not expect that to happen. And he reacts he wants to try to put himself into a good light and make things clear with Elizabeth, explain his situation, which is why he writes the letter in the first place. And then the letter itself reveals to Elizabeth that she misjudged him. Yeah, he's proud. Yes, he's arrogant, but he is not the bad guy that, you know, she once thought him to be. So she kind of has to reset her feelings about him, which is why the novel kind of gives us a little bit of space to do that. With his leaving, with her leaving, the gap, physical gap, they're actually separated by quite a bit of distance. It kind of gives them both a space to kind of adjust their feelings, adjust their behavior, rethink a lot of things, and so that when they do meet again, it will be in a much better, much more mature place there. So the last thing that I want to talk about is the situation with Lydia and the secret now that Darcy and Elizabeth and now Jane are keeping. So Mr. Bennet has been from day one very detached from his family, from their affairs. You know, if they bother him, his wife's nagging gets on his nerves, the girls' activities, it kind of irritates him all the time. And so he's kind of like that out of sight, out of mind kind of camp where, you know, if it's going to happen, it happens. He doesn't have to put his hands into it, and the less he knows about it, the better. But his... Susan, could you please pardon the interruption? Apologies, between the intercom and my telephone, like it's been like 9 million interruptions during the screencast. So the fact that he unreservedly allows his daughter, his very young daughter, may I add, she's 15, to go to Brighton with another family. And the fact that she is absolutely a flirt, she is infatuated with the soldiers, and she is constantly throwing herself in a position to get attention from them. It just kind of functions as a reminder of his irresponsibility and his detachment from his family. It's a danger. It's a danger for her to go off without a family member. You know, yes, she's going to have a guardian, but this woman is not her family. They're not going to keep her in check at the level that someone needs to be keeping her in check. And then now we have Darcy knows the true character of Wickham and hasn't told anybody but Elizabeth at this point. And now Elizabeth and now Jane, by proxy, know that Wickham's real identity is that he's a cad and that he's a, you know, a money gold digger kind of guy, and he's professed his affection for women only because they have something to give him their fortune. This kind of really foreshadows events that are going to happen a little bit later in the novel. This decision to keep this all quiet is going to come back to haunt them later. We're going to see that moving forward as we go along into the next section of our text.